Welcome to The Logic of Generosity, the podcast for bold nonprofit leaders who refuse to settle for ordinary. Here, we cut through the noise with unfiltered insights from fundraising experts designed to spark bigger gifts, deeper donor connections, and a brighter future for your mission. Let's dive in.
This episode is brought to you by Pleiades Nonprofit Advisors. Are you leaving generosity on the table? At Pleiades Nonprofit Advisors, we don't just build gift planning programs. We create opportunities for your donors to do something remarkable. Whether you're a small nonprofit or a major player, we specialize in helping you unlock the full potential of planned giving. From crafting visionary strategies for deferred estate gifts to sparking immediate impact with gifts of appreciated assets, we bring expert, award-winning talent to the table. Need more than marketing? We go deeper. We'll connect with your donors directly, fostering meaningful conversations that lead to transformational gifts. Imagine this, a program that not only grows your mission, but empowers your donors to give in the ways that they never thought possible. That's what we do. Don't let your nonprofit miss out on tax-savvy giving strategies that inspire your supporters and sustain your mission. Let's build something extraordinary together. Visit us today, because the future of your nonprofit is too important to wait. Links are in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by Stillwater Capital Management. Stillwater Capital Management is a full-service wealth management firm that takes pride in its goal-based financial planning, extensive market expertise, and exceptional customer service. They are dedicated to helping individuals, families, and for-profit and nonprofit businesses achieve their unique financial goals. Each of their clients receives a personalized financial plan tailored to suit their individual needs. As a registered investment advisory company, Stillwater Capital Management holds a fiduciary responsibility to its clients, which means they provide investment advice that always keeps the client's best interest at heart. This episode is brought to you by the Washington Times. The Washington Times is America's newspaper. We are Main Street media, not mainstream. When you read the Washington Times, you receive fresh, reliable coverage of events shaping your world today and tomorrow. Each day, you will receive unbiased and fair coverage of both sides of important issues, written and delivered to you by some of the most award-winning, trusted journalists in the country. You can subscribe to the Times' daily emails, such as Threat Status, which delivers breaking news on matters of national security, intelligence, and the military that affect the future of our nation. The Times' Higher Ground newsletter examines matters of faith, ethics, and morality, and gives readers multiple sides to the important issues of the day. Join the many educated readers who know the value of a Washington Times subscription. The Washington Times is a leading advocate for freedom of speech and an open discussion of all issues, which is why it is proud to sponsor this podcast. For more information about the Washington Times, please see their website on the show notes.
All right. If I'm here with Kevin Berry from Mount St. Mary's University. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Hey, I've got a question for you. Are you at home right now? Are you
Well,
back home?
I'm in DC.
You're in DC. How cold is it right now?
Uh, you know, I haven't been paying attention to the weather these days. Just don't pay attention to the news. We live in LA, so traffic's bad and weather's good. So I have a jacket on, but, not a heavy one. So
Okay.
about 1 week away from spring is kind of what I would say to the weather.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason why I'm asking, because I thought you were back east because you're from Philly, right?
hmm Yeah,
I mean, and
go birds.
besides, Rocky and a good cheesesteak, as well as Trading Places. I mean, I've seen the movies. I'm sure there's probably a little history there too. So, but with your background, when did you come from Philly to California?
Mhm. Yeah, so I actually lived in LA twice. Um, first time I came was in '07. I started in the media relations world. I was doing some press work for the Avon Walk for Breast Cancer and a few other nonprofits and tech companies. Was also an entertainment critic for Out.com and, just hustling like everyone else. Moved in around back east around March '09, uh, and really got my start in higher ed fundraising there, working for the University of Pennsylvania in international development, and then moved on from there to a women's college, Cedar Crest College in Allentown. Then major gift officer for Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. After that, I came back to LA almost 5 years ago this month, next month, something like that, one day into the pandemic.
Oh,
And
wow.
I've been here ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've known you for a while now, and I don't know if I knew that background. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. And I did not know that you are a film critic. And I mean, I just okay. So what did you critique, man?
So it was entertainment. So it was basically anything my editor didn't want to. It was yeah, indie films, TV shows. I will say I got to see Wicked and Avenue Q when they came to the Pantages, so that was pretty cool.
Sure.
Um, but I really got to dive in deep on a lot of indie stuff at the time, so that was pretty neat.
That's really cool. And was it the first time that you had saw Wicked or at the Pantages?
Yeah, it was. It
Okay. What was
was.
your impression?
It was very powerful. You know,
Yeah.
I think that I've really I've really learned to appreciate that musical more every time that I've seen it. Um, one of my classmates in college, D. Russ Coley, played Alphabet more times than anyone else in in history. Um, so I think that shared connection is also there.
For sure.
Um, but I think that Wicked's really turned in it has a life of its own at this point.
Oh, it certainly has. And of course, once the movie came out, all of, the world began to just recognize that it's like, oh, wow, this is, but it's been on Broadway for, I don't know how long. It's been on Broadway for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, almost 20 years at this point, just under.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, my daughter keeps me, abreast of all of what's happening on Broadway and what's happening off Broadway, and then there's off Broadway. And so she continues to just kind of keep me in the loop with what it is that she's doing, especially in the playwriting space, because that's kind of her thing. So
Nice.
every once in a while, I get it. And just as a warning to you, to pretty much everybody else, if I do kind of go into a coughing spell, I need to explain why. So I last week I was in Summit County, Colorado, and it's cold, of course, and you're really high altitude. And after a fair amount of exertion on a bad mogul run, um, I ended up developing what they call HAPE, and I didn't know what HAPE was, but it basically means high altitude um, pulmonary edema. And so it's just where this fluid begins to build up in the lungs. And it's the second time it's happened in 2 years. So I got issues and I
Yikes.
didn't recover until I got to a lower elevation. For a couple of days, I was in Denver trying to just regroup and go to a hospital and everything. And they just said, well, yeah, you go lower. It's like, I don't know how to do that without getting on a plane. They said, get on a plane. And so I ended up getting on the plane and heading back over to LA, and that's about as low as you can go. And ended up actually doing it in a much better space today than I was just 2 days ago.
My
And so
goodness. Well, I'm glad that you're doing better now. I mean, you definitely have your energy back, which I love to see.
Yeah,
We
well,
love
the
this
color
version
was
of Andy.
gone when we talked the other day. It's like,
It
oh,
was.
Andy, you poor guy, you gonna get through this, man.
You had an
Uh,
interpreter with you.
so I want to talk a little bit about you're going after your, is it a master's or in leadership, or is
No,
this
I'm going actually for my doctoral
you're doing a
degree,
PhD? Okay,
EDD
or
in
EDD.
organizational leadership and innovation at St. Francis University.
Where's that
In
located at?
So Loretto, Pennsylvania. The biggest town near Loretto is Altoona, and that's about a half hour away. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay. How did you land on St. Francis? I mean, obviously it's Pennsylvania,
sure.
but what else?
Yeah, so I actually I it took me a lot of discerning to find this one because I was looking at all sorts of degrees, from law degrees to a doctor in finance to a EDD in higher education, but I wanted something just a little bit different. Um, So St. Francis had this doctorate in organizational leadership and innovation, and it kind of had everything I was looking for. So 3 years ago, I spoke with Dr. Tricia McFadden, who is the dean of the program, about what I was looking for. And the timing just wasn't right. So I paused. I didn't pull the trigger, and that's when I did the research into the other programs. And I loved that it was a Catholic school. I
Yeah,
loved that it was the coursework aligned with me. I loved the cost of it. Um, was a lot cheaper than some of the other programs,
sure,
and
sure.
but um, the thing that I really liked most is it's a scholar practitioner model. So some of the academic programs you go to, it's just like theory, theory, theory. But this is applied theory as you go along. Like they want you to, as you work, apply to journals and make it relevant to the workplace. So 3 years later, I must have been in her tickler file because Dr. McFadden called me up and she said, "Hey, Kevin, are you still thinking about the program?" And because we now have tracks, and I was looking at your transcripts. We could give you some transfer credits. And I'm like, you know what? I'm
Woo.
in. I'm in. And it's been one of the best decisions. I love my classmates. I actually just came from my residency, so I can geek out on a lot of that stuff. But the people there are just wonderful.
I love it. And have you been doing much of your doctorate online, or is there like a hybrid
Yep.
model, or how's that work?
It's a hybrid model. You do a lot of work in 8-week courses, and you go once a semester, spring, summer, fall. You go onto campus uh, in the cohort. So that's where I'm just coming from. I'm doing dinner visits in DC after my residency to make the most out of the trip.
Okay. So one thing I know about you, Kevin, and I suspect that we probably have some of this in common in terms of just how we function as human beings. And
Oh,
that is you, yeah, right, right. That's a loaded statement. Is that you're a guy who processes things,
mm,
and which I admire, and I like that just because I'm kind of built the same way, to where decisions aren't necessarily made without just some time to ruminate
mhm.
and
Sure.
just time to just kind of process and take things in and recognize that, look, you know what, let's not rush to decisions or solutions without getting a better understanding, a more well-rounded understanding of what the issue is. And so that's what I've observed about working together with you for this last year or so.
Mm.
And would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think it's about intentionality, right? I think, yes, I do try to, you can't always do that,
Right.
obviously, but I think it's about moving with intention. Uh, what's the why, right?
Hmm.
Think about why you're doing things. Uh, Saying that we've always done it that way isn't going to fly with me.
I hear you. And at the same
Yeah,
day, you might be actually doing things a certain way, but the solution that it requires in order to change is so invested in so many different orchestrated pieces that it's like, look, I can't put the time
right.
into making those changes, and so we're going to have to just put it on the shelf for a time or whatever.
Sure.
Sometimes that's a very difficult process because the other side is, well, we need to change all this, and by changing all this, you find yourself about headlong into a matter that now you're 4, 5, 6 months into it, only to realize it was far more complex and far more challenging. And the implications on so many different fronts are like, oh, well, did you see that coming? No, no, did you see that coming? No, I didn't realize that. And you don't realize until it's too late and you've already invested into the major changes. So it sounds, at least that's my sense, is that you're pretty careful before putting yourself into a circumstance without getting a fairly good read of the dynamics.
I mean, I try, right? I I guess I hesitate to answer that because there's always going to be that person that says, "Really, that guy? I'll tell you a story." Right? We all make stupid decisions,
For sure.
um, but I do my best to try to be that way. That's how I'll answer that.
Okay, so I do have a question on that front
Mm,
because you're in a leadership position at Mount St. Mary's.
mm.
Your official position is what?
I'm the assistant vice president of development and alumni relations.
Okay. And in that, how many direct reports would you say you have?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3. I I believe I have 5 or 6. And then yeah, add in the consultants. So
Okay.
yeah, but we'll go in the five
Okay.
or six.
And with the 5 or 6 that you have, you're relying upon them obviously to bring a clear picture to you as best as they possibly can. And you have to discern whatever clear picture that you're hoping that they're bringing
Mhm.
is, uh, how do I say it? In working with direct reports, sometimes they want to constitute change or they want you to do something about a problem. And
Mhm.
in doing something about the problem, they may not necessarily have a complete read, or they may not
Yeah.
necessarily know all the facts that are engaged. Would you say that you kind of go about dealing with a dynamic if something comes to mind? You don't have to get into details if you don't want to, but I'm just curious, how would you go about solving that problem in if indeed somebody's giving you maybe 70% of the story?
Yeah. So my good friend Ted Lasso would say, be curious, not judgmental.
I love it.
And I think that's some of the best leadership advice you could give. First of all, I'm lucky in that I have a wonderful team supporting me. I think that everyone I work with, I absolutely adore and love and respect,
Yeah.
which is a
That
gift.
helps. That
It,
helps.
it, it, it does, and it really is a true gift. Um, I think that when you have a situation like that, um, I I ask a lot of questions. Sometimes it's annoying, but I try to get context from them, and because there's so many things going on, sometimes I ask them if I've given them context as to why I asked them to do something,
Okay.
right? Uh, uh, Brene Brown always says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind, and
Okay.
ask clarifying questions until something becomes clear. So I give as much information as I'm allowed uh, to help clarify situations like that. And, when it comes to my staff, I kind of ask for the same. Transparency is key, I think.
I think you're onto something that's really helpful there. And sometimes if you've, in a leadership position, sometimes it's easy to go on the questioning offensive.
Hmm.
And it's easy for that to slip into a sense of accusation.
Sure.
And for folks who are on the receiving end of said questions to suddenly feel super, super uncomfortable as if, they're not sure. It's like, where's this coming from? Or is he angry? Is he about to bring some swift sort of judgment that
Yeah.
that comes on me. And so as a result, they then begin to, it's just human nature, I think, at work, where there's a sense where I'm going to only give what absolutely is necessary simply because I'm fearful of maybe something being conveyed in a poor way or for whatever retribution that I might sense might be coming my way if I answer inappropriately or wrong.
Who wants to work like that?
I
Right?
know,
I
I
mean,
know.
I, you know, um, we say a lot in the office, a phrase that the Sisters of St. Joseph use, and that's hold things lightly, right? It just kind of means, you know, roll, kind of like roll with the punches. If it's just learn to things change, the only constants change. Lead with love, hold it lightly because it's going to change with the giving day, right?
It
So,
does. It does.
um,
And so many things can be impacting their
yeah.
own day and their own lives, of course.
So, I mean, it really, I'll tell you, as an East Coaster, that was a real tough thing for me to do, is to learn to roll with that because by nature, I'm a little type A.
Hmm.
I recognize that. I accept that. Um, but I've really learned to develop, um, the pregnant pause, the okay, let's take a beat,
Okay.
let's pause, sit back and let's see how this plays out. Let's lead with love,
Okay.
and it's been serving me.
I would imagine. When did you figure that out?
When did I figure it out? When I had to. No, I think the pandemic helped. You know, um, I think the pandemic was a great reminder of how little control any of us really have, you know? So I'd like to say it was the great reset.
For sure.
So I think a year or two into the job I figured it out. Maybe I'm still figuring it out. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if you ever come to a place where you got it completely figured out.
Sure.
Um, at least not that I'm aware of, but because you're always just challenging yourself and, looking to become the best version of yourself that you can become, right?
Sure.
S- So,
Sure.
okay, so here's with the leadership degree that you're going after,
Hmm.
what prompted that need? And what do you feel like I mean, here's the thing, is like when you go to coursework and you're actually going down a particular track, I don't even know what track that is. You're gonna have to tell me. But there's going to be an overlap or perhaps a recognition of certain common ideas that routinely get repeated to you via various teachers and professors in work and study. And there's going to be this, like, it finally dawns upon you, and it usually takes me a few hammers, blows to the head to figure it, oh, that's what's being said. And that's, it's like, oh, now I get it. And it takes
Yeah.
me even much longer to make it really applicable and relevant to actually how I carry out my day. What
Hmm.
do you feel like you're taking away from the track that you're going down? What track is it, by the way?
Yeah. Um, I think it's too soon for me to answer that question. I only started in August.
Okay.
Give me
Okay.
another year.
All right. All right.
It's a 3-year program, so May 27 I'll be graduating. But uh, I could probably tell you in another 6 to 12 months what that is. Um, I think that it's thus far, it's really about values-driven leadership. Really, kind of, what's your personal mission? What's your personal vision? What leading with your ethics,
Okay.
right? So, I think that um, I think it's a real focus on learning what your leadership style is like. What type of leader do you want to become, and how are you being strategic about that?
Okay.
Um, One thing that was interesting is uh, so it's been about 20 years since I got my master's, and that's in professional communication theory and public relations. I got that graduated from LaSalle in '06. And at that time, the tipping point just came out. Uh, World before social media was on the rise, just like AI is now. Uh, Malcolm Gladwell, the author, just released Revenge of the Tipping Point,
Hmm.
what he learned in the years since. And so it's been really interesting because I just had to do a presentation on the tipping point for a class, and I was one of the few in the class that read the book. I mean, there were a handful of others, but I'm like, so fascinating being in the classroom yet again, doing
For sure.
doing that
Oh, right. And
presentation 20 years
revisiting
later.
the the
Yeah,
uh the next generation of his writing.
yeah. Um, and seeing how much the world has changed in between.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of those changes, especially as it gets into the arena of fundraising. So I'm going to come
Yeah,
back to that in just a moment, just because I want to make sure we head in that direction.
let's do it.
But prior to that, you just said something
Mhm.
a minute ago that at least the takeaway so far that you've had since the beginning of your doctoral program is to lead by your values, to be able to identify your ethic and the type of leader that you wish to be. Tell me a little bit about that process and
Mhm.
where you're at in terms of forging those values. It's not like the values are new, they've been around for a long time, but in
Yeah,
terms of articulating how they then get translated into your leadership style, that to me is really very fascinating.
sure. So I think that, I mean, we've gone through learning all about different types of leaders and CEOs and the different types of leaderships. And interestingly enough, the type of leader um, that I've seen to relate with most goes back to the guy I was in high school, and it's a Salesian type of leader that is basically a servant leader,
Okay.
right? Um, Someone who isn't afraid to get in the trenches with the people, but also is very mission driven,
I
right?
see.
So, like I'm even though I did PR in the past, as a career coach once put it, you're never going to see me doing media relations for a plastics company. It's just
Okay.
not who I am,
Right. Sure, sure,
right?
sure. I get that. So yeah, there's got to be, and I would imagine this is probably for most people, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just making it up. But there's got to be an alignment for
Mm.
personally what it is that you believe in and what it is that you would like to see happen in order to make some sort of dent in the future world to to make sure that there's some sort of alignment that you're on the right train to begin with.
Yeah,
I would assume.
yeah, exactly. So,
Okay. Okay. And all right. So you are seeing yourself as a guy who's saying, look, I'm in alignment with the mission. I want to make sure that I'm in the trenches. I want to, and in my mind, I start thinking just by modeling by example and saying, come with me as I do this and exemplifying your own life as a life that says, look, this is going to be how I live. And my hope is that I inspire you forward enough to recognize that this is a good direction that I'm heading. Come and follow me. Is that kind of the idea?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's basically gentle strength is probably the best way to say it, right? Like,
Sure.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
The idea of meek, right?
Well,
Um, I mean that
humble.
that
Yeah.
that meek idea. I remember hearing it this way: is
Hmm.
the capacity of being in power, but controlling that power and recognizing that you are. It's not about you, even though you might be able to exert a significant amount of influence and power. It's not about you. It's about you being a conduit for something much bigger than you.
Yeah. And I mean, I would hope that's what people would say.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
a good thing. I like it. Tell me a little bit about, let's move over to the giving part.
It's not.
And you had you had constructed an article. I would imagine it's probably for one of the courses of your doctoral work, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that you had shared in that particular paper
Mhm.
is that there is some sort of combining effort of transformational leadership, strategic storytelling, digital innovation, and behavioral insights. That a nonprofit looking at those four particular strengths, I suppose, or I guess hunks that you're able to accomplish something bigger when it comes to engaging a donor to be in alignment with the direction that you're heading as an organization.
Yes.
Using those particular terms, I want to kind of extract each one a little bit and talk a little bit about them. Let's talk a little bit about the transformational leadership first. What are you talking about?
Sure. So donor transformational leadership, basically, uh, it's about the messaging, right? Donors respond positively to a clear vision in the messaging, uh, re- reinforcing reinforcing the importance of strong leadership through like testimonials from alumni, through uh, Russell James stated this in a 2021 survey, like living donors, right?
Mhm.
Um, when you show a clear vision, when you show clear messaging, um, you'll see an impact, an increased amount of planned giving results through the
Okay.
messaging. Um, I, I hope I stuttered a little bit there,
That's
but
okay. I'm going to
you,
ask some clarifying questions here.
yeah, go ahead.
And here's one of the things that I'm seeing, and maybe this will kind of set the table for us a little
Yeah,
bit, is in a lot of nonprofits, we all know that not one nonprofit is the same as another nonprofit. They all have their own unique style, just based on not only their foundings, their history, their
sure,
origins, but also their staff, their coordination, their board. Everything is kind of unique to that particular nonprofit. Even nonprofits that are going to carry literally identical missions. A humane society. We kind of know what that is, but not two humane societies are the same. And because they're going to be in different locations, geographically, but also demographically, as well as parts of the country, and just overall ways that maybe people regard their pets, it might be different in Wyoming than it is here in California, right?
sure.
And so that said, is I've seen, especially in the gift planning space, I've
Mhm.
seen the issue, and this is something I've wrestled with so many times, and I'm going to say it just with the idea of asking a question, and that is, Andy, you want me to give the largest gift potentially that I will have ever given in the entirety of my life. And we understand that in most cases for donors, their final gift, if it's a bequest, a beneficiary designation, or maybe they put it into one of, types of a charitable remainder trust, that final gift is going to be the sum total or beyond probably the sum total of giving that they have given through an entire lifetime. significantly beyond in some
Mhm.
cases. Just depends on the size of gift and where maybe, the organization is on the pecking order. But in many cases, organizations will have a hard time selling the individual to give a planned gift. In many cases, simply because the individual is questioning of maybe leadership. They're questioning, will it be around? That's why they
Mm.
set up maybe a or contingent organization. Their questioning is this the organization that I used to support and is going in a different direction? And there's probably a host of other issues that begin to rear their heads as to why a donor might show some hesitancy. And can you share a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing at Mount St. Mary's as to why what some of the things that you're trying to do to address those issues?
Well, sure. I mean, that's when you talk about the transformational leadership. I think uh, that's exactly what we're talking about. You want leaders who articulate a compelling vision, who are inspiring confidence, who are helping to find ways where you're able to engage the donors meaningfully, um, and make them feel like you're not going out of business, right?
For
Um,
sure.
younger donors especially appreciate the transparency. Most people who are in higher ed are going after people who are 60 or 70, when
Sure.
studies show that and studies and common sense shows that most people create their wills when they're 40, right? Because they're thinking about their kids or
Yeah,
whatever.
guardianship or whatever.
Right. So, we're at Mount St. Mary's, what we're doing is we're doing a lot of educating. We're getting ready for our 100th anniversary. We're leaning into that, right? We're basically just adding the personal. We excel at adding the personal touch to things. So I think what we're just really doing. We have an amazing leader in Anne McElhaney Johnson. Uh, she just is. Um, just motivational, inspirational. I just think the world of her. So I think that we have a real easy sell when it comes to planned giving, right? Because we can communicate a vision. We can show this is what we're doing with your gift. We were here for 100 years, and we're going to be here beyond the 100 for 100 more. So I think that's kind of what I was trying to say in the research article is find uh, find communication strategies where you could share that vision and personalize the storytelling to strengthen like some sort of emotional connection, right? For us, it would be incorporating some sort of nostalgia and connecting it to the impact,
Okay.
right? And that's kind of where I was going with the transformational leadership.
Well, that does make sure that it rings true that the transformational leadership is also the one that is coming together with a strategy of storytelling. And which, of course, is your second point in this particular article. And the thing about strategic storytelling to me is going to be I mean, at the end of the day, when you're putting out vision in front of constituency of anybody who will care to hear, and you're
Mhm.
shouting it for the rooftops, not only on a communication to a student body or to an alum body or to a faculty or staff, but it's also going to be on a lot of the one-on-one stuff. There are going to be talking points that you develop when you put together that strategic story.
Mhm.
But what I think would be helpful for folks here
Mhm.
is, Kevin, how do you craft that strategic story, or maybe better, have you crafted your strategic story to be able to cast that vision and to be able to bring about the inspiration that you're hoping to bring about with those individuals that you're meeting with on a routine basis?
I mean, we call Pleiades nonprofit advisors, and
Is that
recommend them
right?
if anyone's out there. No. One thing we do is we add to the gift agreements an appendix asking them about 4 or 5 questions about why they give. What do they want us to know about their motivations for this gift? And uh, basically biographical information, so that whenever there's some sort of endowed gift, um, we have information on that we could go back to craft some sort of messaging moving forward. When it comes to a planned gift, there's usually multiple conversations.
Yeah, of
uh,
course, of course.
so hopefully we would have enough information to craft the storytelling moving into that. Um, but what I find the most difficult thing for us always is the pictures, right? We never have enough pictures.
Oh, I see. So, okay, so let's say you're meeting with donor X, and donor X has been in your portfolio for some time.
Hmm.
You've had a connection. There's been
Yeah.
cultivation that's been taking place for years in many cases. And at some point in time, when it becomes clear to you, when it becomes clear to your philanthropic staff, when it comes clear to your overall, maybe higher up leadership by what it is that you're charging them to consider. Maybe the fact is that they are very capable individuals who want to be challenged, who would like, they're invested enough in Mount St. Mary's and the direction that you're going by virtue of all of the communication through their history, through their background, through how they have personally benefited in some way, shape, or form because of what Mount St. Mary's has means to them personally or indirectly through a family member or a friend or whatever. And then from there, to be able to pull together a compelling ask. And in that has to now come this woven strategy of story and possibility
Hmm.
and a compelling direction.
Hmm.
What would something like that sound like? Do like? What would you put together to put that together to do that?
It's the you know, this the tough thing for it's hard for me to answer that because it's one of those things I just do, and I don't know how to explain that I do it
I
given
know,
how
but that's
long
why
I've
we
been
got to
doing
break it
it.
down.
Yeah, I mean,
I know it's just something you
with
do.
with the communications background and the fundraising background, I've just been doing that for so long
Right.
that it's hard for me to explain the step by step.
But just think that's your thesis for your doctorate right there.
There you go. Done.
You're
Done.
welcome.
Let's write it. Um, so let's deconstruct. Let me think. So I think the first thing I always do is I look for impact, right? Like
Mhm.
what just because you have a story doesn't mean it's a good story. Although any story is better than no story,
True.
right? So is it relatable, right? Um, you want people want to see people they can relate to
Yeah.
in what you are writing and what you are putting in the magazine. If they can't relate to it, it's not going to provide you any results.
True.
Um, what I would then do is see if I had like 100 stories, what one can I tie to the university's priorities so that I get the biggest bang for the buck. That obviously that's an optional one, but that's always helpful. Um, I don't know what else. Yeah, that's where I would start.
Hmm. I would imagine then, even as you relate the issue of impact, you relate the issue of the university priorities.
and and living donor stories. I
Okay.
think that's
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
living donor stories are is a place where people forget a lot of time. Living donor stories increase engagement by 40%.
People like us do
Yeah.
things like this. And I agree. It's actually interesting that you bring that up. We were talking about this just yesterday about trying to figure out how we can engage and help engage our clientele to develop a donor story campaign
Mhm.
for each of the organizations we work with, because I see it as so much potential, but it's oftentimes the last thing that is done simply
Mhm.
because it's an afterthought. We all know that, oh no, we have to do that. But it's a matter of, it's kind of like playing giving, it's like, oh, we have to do it. But it's not a priority because we have another fish that we need to fry and we need to actually get onto that. And so it's easy to forsake that important part. And there's also so much value in edifying the donor that they made a great decision and having them articulate their own story. It's kind of like after you've made a purchase,
Mhm.
you're really proud about that purchase and any other purchase because you did your research and you did this with a lot of thought. And of course, it was the best decision that ever could be made. And for somebody to not recognize that like you recognize that, well, forget them. you know,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's I think it's you know you mentioned how for many people it's the largest gift of their lifetime,
Mhm.
making the planned gift, making a legacy gift. One thing I think that's important to point out is after they make that legacy gift, more often than not, they become larger major gift donors.
It can,
Um,
sure.
and I think a lot of institutions either don't realize or forget that because the built commitment that they have in the university, they have a vested
They're
interest in it.
vested. That's exactly right.
So I think I'd be remiss if we didn't point that out
Yeah.
because people think, well, planned giving, it's a revocable gift. Typically, I mean, yes, there are some that are irrevocable, but once someone commits to a planned gift, there is a higher likelihood that they are going to become a major donor.
Yeah.
And I think when you're making the case for planned giving to your higher ups, I think that is one of the areas you really want to talk about because you know we have what is it what's the number 84 trillion expected to shift between baby boomers and the younger generations right now.
Yeah.
um, I'd say it's probably going to go up from what is about 5 or 10% of the pie to at least 15 to 20% in the coming years.
For those who
Um,
have their shingles out, and for those who are saying we're open for business and running some sort of marketing program and conversation program, for sure. They'll get the lion's share of whatever lands in a charity's pan.
so I think that I think that we need to continue to yeah continue to focus on that.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing too, the Gen Xers don't have as many kids, right?
Right.
With childless donors being 3 times more likely to leave a bequest, the next generation coming up, my generation, you know, we might not have as much as the baby boomers, but we still have quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I think planned giving is not going to go anywhere. Any fundraiser who's not educating themselves on how do fundraising, um, is missing the boat.
We used to, it wasn't my expression, but Judy Smith, she's in the plan giving consultant space out of Arizona and
Mhm.
Colorado. She called that dynamic. There's an actual Russell James slide that talks about what happens prior to a bequest. 8 years prior, there was a longitudinal study that he conducted, and
Yeah.
then 8 years after a planned gift was left, that the annual gift that donor made was $3,172 more than the previous years prior to leaving a bequest. And it was a very fascinating study. She calls it the tattoo slide. In other words, if there's ever a place that I get a slide tattooed on my arm,
Uh, yeah, absolutely.
that's going to be the slide that she would want to have tattooed. And so, to your point, yes, indeed, if you're not in the gift planning space, I'm pretty sure you're going to watch the world pass you by, and you're going to wonder why some organizations skyrocket
Mhm.
by means of, I mean, if anyway, there's another Russell James study, and you studied with Russell, and so you're familiar with his stuff, and that is that if you're on a 5 year trajectory, your total donation revenue average increase will be about 11%, versus for those who have actually gotten into not only deferred gifts, but complex asset oriented gift options have gone up by 65 to 70% in that same 5 year trajectory. So
Yeah.
if we are open for business to be able to help donors understand that they have valid options that are going to be better tax wise, as well as potentially trading a gift for a source of revenue or income and using it as an exit strategy for a business interest or a real estate property, that ends up becoming a surplus of income for them as well as a tax benefit. And it's such a far removed thing from most individuals doing fundraising because it's not money in the door right now, at least as far as they can see. But
Mhm.
it is, in many cases, that it is one of those irrevocable types of giving ways. I mean, not all, but some.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so
Uh,
you're calling out to my heart, man. Uh, so it's funny because we got like a few minutes left here,
oh my
Kevin. But
gosh.
I know it went by fast. I told you it would, man.
Yeah.
Um, I am curious, and we're not going to be able to get into too much of the other stuff, but I just feel like the storytelling
Mm.
component is such a critical and often unused component to incorporate in the relationship that you have been cultivating and developing in your own portfolio and
Mhm.
working with donors that you're visiting and you're connecting with and sharing with them some inspirational story that might incorporate another donor for what they've done. It might incorporate some vision of where Mount St. Mary's is going, the impact that Mount St. Mary's has had, probably having them share the nature of their impact that Mount St. Mary's has had with them, maybe getting to the why that you had talked about earlier. Is there
Mhm.
something else that you would incorporate into that visit?
Yeah, so I always try to keep the focus on them, right? So and tie it back to the traditions of the college,
Okay.
right? So if I obviously read the donor file, figure out what's important to them, uh, find out what their other philanthropic interests are, right? But also, one of the first questions I ask every donor is, um, I play dumb. What is your favorite memory of the Mount? What can you tell me about your time there? And I mean, I guess I shouldn't say plain dumb because I really don't know the answers to them, but I love hearing them. I love
Yeah.
hearing the donor stories. We it every fundraiser is in essence a storyteller.
Yeah.
And again, Russell taught me that it's our job to help the donor complete their hero story,
Yeah.
right? And I think that when you reframe it that way, it becomes a lot less scary to ask for money. It becomes a lot less monotonous. It's our job to get the stories out of the donors and to help them fulfill their legacies.
And I would imagine, and this is maybe something that doesn't necessarily come up. I mean, especially in gift planning space, we're so focused on the giving vehicles and the structure. And I get that. And it becomes kind of a negotiation and, we're kind of in that space.
Mm.
However, the thing that oftentimes doesn't come up as nearly as much is all of the stories that you're extracting eventually become a part of the tapestry of your own story that you're sharing future with future visits. And so you're developing this memory bank of all sorts of donor stories. It's like, oh, you know what? I remember when that happened to this particular individual when, 3 years ago and blah, blah, blah.
Right. So the financial tools are just that, the tools,
Mhm.
right? They're they're only part of it. I think what you're getting at is why the institutional knowledge is so important and the
Yes,
turnover issue and retention is so real, which we could talk for another hour
probably.
about. That's a
Right.
whole nother podcast. But I think the getting to know the donors, getting to know their why, that is the real heart of fundraising and what we do. Because if you're only in the job for 18 months, like the average fundraiser is, you're not really getting to know who the donors are. You barely get to know what the culture is. I think it really takes about 3 or 4 years to really get to know the heart of a organization, especially if you're doing planned giving.
For sure. What do you think the impact is for the organization that can't keep a development person for more than 18 months, which seems to be the standard, by the way? And what does that share and communicate to a donor who basically just says, "Oh, you're the latest version, huh? Well, I'll outlast you," that kind of thing.
I think it depends on the organization. I think if you're a quant culture, like a science culture or something like that, the it's different because the numbers are numbers, right? But I do think you're onto something there because even in those cultures, people 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 want to know. You need to build relationships with people, right? I think one of the greatest mistakes people make in fundraising is they forget that you're building a relationship with the university, right? Um, and I guess I guess for the way I the way I would answer that is the more turnover you have, the harder it is to build quality relationships. And at a certain point, the donors are going to get tired,
Yes.
fatigued,
Yeah,
and it's going to
because
hurt your retention.
immediately, I mean, this is just what comes to mind when I think of that. Whatever the newest version of donor officer or development officer is, it's met with the same, "Hey, good to see you, nice to meet you," and you already know that this is going to result in an ask at some point in time, and you just know that they're just going to be hanging around because that's what they have to do, that's what they get paid to do. And I think what happens from the perspective of somebody who donates, I mean, I'm not a major donor, but at least I'm a donor. And so from somebody who does that, I mean, first of all, it is nice to be thanked and it's nice to be appreciated, which would be beneficial for some organizations to consider doing. But on the other hand, it might be one of those things to where it would be if I was kind of like the target of somebody's, you know, ex I don't know how to say it, but somebody taking from me, uh, then I would probably be a bit hesitant, if not frustrated, and eventually just say, leave me alone.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that. And I think that's legitimate. Um, in the end, whether you're telling a story or asking for money, it's people first. It, it's people first. You can put the personal touch on, focus on the you attitudes. Like it's not I. It's not about the fundraiser. It's about the donor.
Yeah,
And that should come across in your writing. That should come across in your attitude. That should come across in everything you do. And if there's one takeaway, it's that.
that's so good. Kevin, Kevin Barry, everybody. That was our hour's done. And
Very good.
I want to say thank you. And
Thank
I'm
you.
going to go ahead and just press stop here in just a second. So hang on tight, and everybody else will catch you next time. Thank you.
See you.